So there are other legal cases that Donald Trump is dealing with, including the documents issue, the Mar-a-Lago documents, and there are new developments this week that Donald Trump might have participated in possible obstruction with some of those materials that were at Mar-a-Lago. During an interview with Fox News last week, Donald Trump was asked whether he would personally look through boxes of documents from his presidency while they were stored at Mar-a-Lago. Here's his response last week.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that.
Right.
I would do that. There'd be
All right,
nothing
let me
wrong.
move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff.
Willie.
You do?
Willie. Sean was tried to help.
You're allowed to take stuff?
Meatball Don. He was trying. Oh, wait, that's Meatball Ron. Sean was trying to help Trump time and again. Okay, but I know you wouldn't do that. Sure, I would. Okay, let's move. And then he goes, let's move on.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I want to completely prove the federal government's case. And then he goes on and proves the federal government's case, which, of course,
You're not allowed to take stuff.
More relevant now, Willie, after the Washington Post story that broke this weekend.
If you're the prosecutor or the special counsel in this case, it's just clip and save these interviews, clip and save, some of it amounting to a partial confession. Remember, it was last September in a different interview with Sean Hannity when Donald Trump said you can declassify documents just by thinking about them. As former president of the United States, if he thought about them being declassified, then they, in fact, would be declassified. We should ask Chuck Rosenberg, as a former prosecutor himself, if you are the special counsel, if you are Jack Smith, what are you making of these interviews that Donald Trump is giving again, especially the ones to Sean Hannity?
You know, I was thinking, Willie, about when I was a federal prosecutor preparing for trial, I would literally have a manila folder, which I would label my cross-examination file. And every time I found a document or someone said something or something that I thought could be useful, I'd put it in that file. The file here would be enormous. I mean, as prosecutors, we collect stuff, we hold on to stuff, we never know exactly when we're going to need stuff. But Mr. Trump, from a prosecutor's perspective, if you're preparing for cross-examination, is a gift that keeps on giving. And so they're going to have a lot of information, a lot of clips, a lot of the things he's said to choose from. Whether or not he gets on the stand, whether or not they ever get to use it, we'll save that question for another day. But prosecutors are always collecting a cross-examination file, and Mr. Trump can't help himself. He always talks about Mr. Trump, and that just makes the file bigger and bigger and bigger.
He just can't help himself. And I want us to play this clip again, because, again, in light of the Washington Post reporting this weekend, it becomes even more relevant. Let's play this clip again in case you all, well, first of all, missed Donald Trump's confession, and two, missed Sean Hannity trying to move him along, and he just wouldn't do it because he was like going, no, I like my hand on the hot stove so much, I'm going to put the other hand on the hot stove. Run it, TJ.
I can't imagine you ever saying, bring me some of the boxes that we brought back from the White House. I'd like to look at them. Did you ever do that?
I would have the right to do that. There's nothing wrong with it.
But I know you. I don't think you would do it.
Well, I don't have a lot of time, but I would have the right to do that. I would do that. There'd be nothing wrong.
Let me move on.
Remember this.
Yeah.
This is the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. Do you know that they ended up paying Richard Nixon, I think, $18 million for what he had? They did the Presidential Records Act. I have the right to take stuff. I have the right to look at stuff.
I have the right to take stuff and look at stuff, even after, as the Washington Post suggests, federal investigators and the feds try to get him back. And federal investigators, the Post reports, have new and significant evidence which shows that after the subpoena was delivered, Trump was rummaging through boxes of the documents in his home because, Elise, he wanted to keep certain things in his possession that the federal government said he had to return to them.
And Joe, this is where Donald Trump could really get in trouble, because that's obstruction.
Right.
And he differentiates himself from other former officials who might have a claim of inadvertently removing classified documents and having classified documents in their personal possession by the fact that he doesn't make good and make amends, and he continues to try to obstruct the government's case. And so you have this case happening in New York City, which one Republican operative called the Mickey Mouse paperwork case. But then you've got the classified document case and how Donald Trump has taken it possibly to the next level if he hasn't been forthright with investigators. And then from there, also you've got Georgia and then E. Jean Carroll next month. So while today is a big deal, there's plenty of other legal action to watch with Donald Trump.
And Joe, people I talked to in Trump's orbit in recent days, offer sort of two sides to how they feel about Manhattan. Yes, they think this could be a short-term political benefit for Trump. They also acknowledge that, of course, Trump doesn't really want to be indicted. No one does. He's concerned. He spent his whole life trying to avoid criminal prosecution. Here it is. But they also acknowledge they feel like this is a matter that can be dealt with. They think more legal peril lies elsewhere. And certainly the two that they say to me they're most worried about, Georgia, which we expect we'll hear about in about a month's time, and then this one here, because, yes, it's about the differences between how Joe Biden and Mike Pence handled their classified document matters and this one. They cooperated. They returned the documents. Donald Trump did not, and they feel like there's a real vulnerability here for obstruction, and Jack Smith seems to be working his way up in his investigation and closing in, although perhaps he could save the taxpayers' money and time by just DVRing Fox News and therefore present his case to the grand jury.
Right. You've got your confession. You don't need depositions. You don't need interrogatories. Just DVR Fox News at night whenever Trump talks, and you're in good shape. Chuck, I'm curious if you agree with those on the inside that Jonathan O'Meara has talked to. Of course, understanding that we still don't know what D.A. Bragg has. We have now. Everybody's been talking about this indictment being strong or weak, being an embarrassment or being a final call to justice. We have no idea what this is going to be. So we lay that on the table right now, just like we don't know exactly what George is going to be, but we have an idea. Same thing with the documents case. Still looking at these things, do you agree with the assessment not only of people inside Trump world, but also with a lot of legal analysts, that right now he seems, from the fact patterns that are laid before us in the media, incomplete, but the fact patterns laid before us in the media and the law in these jurisdictions, relevant jurisdictions, that the Georgia case and the documents case, particularly on the obstruction of returning the documents, seem to be the two cases that could provide Donald Trump the gravest legal peril.
Yeah, I think that's right, Joe. And remember, with respect to the documents case, when the FBI executed the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, they went forward on 3 predicate offenses. One of them at the time was obstruction, right? So the FBI had enough information at the time to include in the affidavit their concerns about obstruction. And as a prosecutor, that's something we always look for. First, because it's illegal, but second, because it also evinces a consciousness of guilt. There's no reason to move stuff or destroy stuff or hide stuff or counsel people not to tell the truth if you haven't done anything wrong. And so if you're trying to turn a weak case into a strong case for the government, obstructing justice is one way of doing that. So I agree generally that the case in New York seems less important. That doesn't make it weak. And I know that's something that Mika and I talked about a couple of days ago. It's not necessarily a weak case. The evidence could be compelling. It could be corroborated. There could be a lot of it. But in terms of charges, it's less serious. How do we know that? Well, for one, the underlying offense, and we'll see whether or not Mr. Bragg actually charges it, is a misdemeanor. By classification, a relatively low-level crime. If we see felony charges, and I expect we will, they'll probably be Class E felonies under New York state law. Again, a relatively low classification of felony. Doesn't mean these charges don't matter. It doesn't mean he won't be held to account. But I agree generally, Joe, with your supposition that the cases in Georgia and the cases under investigation by Jack Smith as special counsel are probably weightier.